Good afternoon. Everyone can hear me okay? All right, great. Again, my name is Brian. I'm the attaché over in Canada with the FBI. I sit over in Ottawa and I oversee the FBI cyber portfolio from an operational, national security, criminal investigative standpoint, and also from the intelligence standpoint. Very honored to be here today with a distinguished panel. These are all my friends, colleagues, and operational partners. And it's very nice to be up here to actually tell the story of true collaboration from an international scope. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce my partner, Amanda KNUTSON, out of FBI Milwaukee. She'll be giving the background on what Genesis is and a background of the FBI investigation itself, which will launch us into Marcello from Europol, visiting us all the way from The Hague, a little bit jet lagged, but still okay, right? But Marcello will be talking about that international coordination optic that he also coordinated with Amanda and team in the FBI. And then taking it back into Canada, we have the RCMP National Cybercrime Coordination Center, Chris LYNAM, Director General, who oversees the federal reach of cybercrime law enforcement and coordination within this country. And then very nice to also have Marc-André PICHÉ to provide a boots-on-the-ground perspective here in the province of Quebec. He's part of the Sûreté du Québec here, leading the cybercrime team. So without further ado, we'll push on over to more of the content of the presentation. So, for years, Genesis Market stored and sold millions of digital identities to criminals, opening the door to an array of illegal activity that was borderless and preyed upon individual, company, and critical infrastructure victims. Amanda will share a little bit more details about the platform a little bit later, but the FBI, if we were to do this on our own, we would fracture them, but then in a couple months, we would anticipate that they would reconstitute. However, what if we work together with over 50 agencies across multiple countries, multiple time zones, and we unified, and we stitched together our capacity and our jurisdictions and coordinated so that we could do something that is joint and sequenced in a manner that would not only frustrate and crush and send everyone moving in different directions, but also dismantle Genesis Market ultimately.
An international police operation has shut down an online marketplace used by cybercriminals. Operation Cookie Monster seized Genesis Market, which cybercriminals used to buy stolen identities and passwords. The FBI and Dutch police led the investigation, which resulted in 119 arrests and 208 raids worldwide.
An online marketplace for cybercrimes has been shut down in Operation
So, if you told me last year that I'd be sitting up here with an FBI supervisory special agent from Milwaukee, with a director general from the RCMP, a Europol partner, as well as someone here in Quebec, and I would be standing up here saying the word Cookie Monster, I would tell you you're lying, but that's what we're doing out here, right? This operation was intentionally collaborative from the very beginning. And in order to help have this conversation, let's start with that case background. And no better person to talk about it than the supervisory special agent that oversaw the whole thing from the beginning to end, Amanda. So Amanda, if you could kick us off, tell us about the case, tell us about Genesis, and how it all began, please. We'll try another one. There we go.
All right. Can everybody hear me now? Is that great? All right, thank you, Brian. Good afternoon. I really appreciate having this opportunity to talk about Operation Cookie Monster. Over the past several years, my team at FBI Milwaukee has been investigating Genesis Market, a dark marketplace, which culminated in this international takedown this past April. The operation was huge. It had a global reach. We had over 400 law enforcement actions in a single day, with about 119 arrests and 208 search warrants executed across the globe. So 16 partner countries participated, And in the US alone, we had 45 FBI field offices also participate. So this was a huge undertaking. If you can imagine a case like this, with all of those partners involved, it took a lot of coordination, a lot of hard work. But I think in order to appreciate what this operation meant, it's important to understand what Genesis was and why it was so important to disrupt them. So like I mentioned, they were a dark marketplace, and what they did was they trafficked in stolen access credentials from compromised machines. So banking, email, social media, any type of e-commerce site that you might have your login and password saved on your machine. It also, though, stole and sold the digital fingerprint of that device. So together it sold the login credentials and the fingerprint. So as most of you know, a digital fingerprint is going to be unique to each individual digital device. And it's a combination of system attributes like browser settings, cookies, keyboard language, that sort of thing. And it's used for legitimate purposes in order to prevent fraud so that websites can authenticate users and they can verify that that user is coming from a machine that they recognize. So what Genesis did, though, is it sold these digital fingerprints and repurposed them for malicious purposes. So a user on Genesis Market, when I use the term user, what that means is basically an individual cyber criminal that created an account on Genesis. Once they had an account, they had the opportunity to purchase anywhere from 1.5 million stolen device IDs and 80 million stolen credentials available on that site. We determined through our investigation that there were over 60,000 registered users of Genesis. So that means there were 60,000 cyber criminals registered on Genesis and could purchase this information. What Genesis did was they packaged this information together and they sold it in what they called a bot. And it was incredibly user-friendly for these users to purchase these bots. And I'll show you in this next slide here what it looks like from a user's perspective. So over here you can see the bot that is available, and what it is, it's a combination of the digital fingerprint and all of the login credentials. And it's so user-friendly, you can search by which location you would like and what types of accounts you're looking for. So this one in particular was a bot that was located in the United States, and these are the, quote, resources available. So these are the accounts that were on this machine that Genesis is selling those credentials for. So PayPal, Amazon, Spotify. And you can specifically search for these as well. If you wanted just Amazon accounts, you could search on Genesis just for Amazon accounts, and it'll show you all the bots available. So that is how user-friendly it was. And what it really did was it lowered the barrier for entry for cybercriminal activity, because you didn't really need a whole lot of technical skills in order to get onto Genesis and to purchase this access. So although it was an invitation-only site, it was available on the ClearNet Open Internet as well as a version on Tor. So once the user purchased the bot, Genesis also provided a custom browser plugin, and that could be used along with the digital fingerprint. And here you can see that you have the login credentials available once you purchased it, and then you can use that with the plugin to mimic the actual user, the legitimate user of the account, and trick third-party websites into believing that it's a legitimate activity. So the FBI considers Genesis Market and other organizations like this key criminal services because they support and enable a variety of cybercrime. So this, a simple bot here on this website could be purchased for as little as $4 US and could cause significant damage. It could clear out somebody's life savings, or it could be used to launch a ransomware attack and cost the company millions of dollars. So anywhere between ID theft, fraud, ransomware, and intellectual property theft. And one of those examples is EA Games suffered an intrusion, and they had a lot of IP, so their sensitive data stolen, millions of dollars worth, and what it originally started with was a $10 bot that a hacker purchased on Genesis Market. So that's just one example of the type of impact that it can have. So Again, this lowers the barrier for entry. No longer do these cyber criminals have to be able to get their own initial access. They don't have to have that technical capability. They can use an initial access broker like Genesis Market to just purchase it. And Genesis targeted victims all across the globe, and the users carried out all sorts of activity. The most significant would be ransomware attacks. So upon initiating our investigation, we tried to develop a strategy in order to disrupt it, and I had a very good case agent that was very motivated to do this. And so traditionally what the FBI does is, in order to take down these organizations, we target the administrators, so the people behind the organization itself, and then the infrastructure, so the domains and the servers and that kind of thing. But in this case, my case agent specifically came up with the idea of wanting to target the users of the service, which is not really something that we've done in the past. We normally just target the service itself. So in targeting the users, the goal here was twofold. One was to send the message to cyber criminals that even if you consider yourself a lower level cyber criminal, you're not a mastermind. That doesn't mean that you're going to be immune from the consequences of cybercrime. But the second reason we did it is because we wanted to target the users so that they would lose confidence in Genesis Market and its ability to keep their information secure from law enforcement. So if they lose that confidence in Genesis, that would help with the dismantlement, and that comes into play later on when I talk about the results. So early on, when we opened this investigation, we recognized that we were going to need our international partners in order to be successful because of the size and the reach of Genesis. And so early on, we started coordinating with Europol, which I'm going to let my colleague Marcello talk about that in great detail. But just wanted to point out that we recognized early on that we needed international partnerships. So through some really good investigative work from my case agent, he was able to identify the back-end server of Genesis where it was hosted. He located it and went out and imaged it. And from that image, we got a wealth of information about the users of Genesis. And so what we did with that data was that we spent a lot of time putting together really comprehensive targeting packages on each of the users, which included all of the information that we had about them. And then what we did was we took those packages and we shipped them off to the partner countries where those individuals were located, as well as we sent them out to all of the FBI field offices where there were users within their area of responsibility. And what we asked was that on a single day in April, we all come together and execute our operation to have the biggest impact all at once. So that date was set for April 4th. And what we did was we followed the sun essentially from Europe to North America to Australia. From the 4th into the 5th, we executed all of these operations in conjunction with seizing the domains for Genesis Market that was on the ClearNet, and also announcing sanctions. Our Treasury Department sanctioned Genesis Market, and then our Department of Justice also put out a press release, and then there was media and press releases all across the world on Genesis. And that was very intentional in order to, again, build that distrust in Genesis. So even though we were only able to target the ClearNet version by taking down those domains, the Tor version was still up. So what Genesis administrators tried to do was shift completely over to Tor, which is something that we expected them to do, which is why we targeted the users. Because by that time, a bunch of users had been targeted, arrested, people lost their confidence in Genesis in their ability to keep their information secure. And so although they tried to reconstitute on Tor, they were unable to because their customers, the users, did not return to them. So within a couple months following the April 4th takedown, the Tor version of Genesis was completely gone and it was dismantled. So this would not have been possible without our partnerships internationally. But this is an excellent example of what the global law enforcement community can do when we work together on something like this. I'll pass it back to you, Brian.
Thanks, Amanda. So 60,000 users were identified by FBI Milwaukee. Those were then subsequently put together in packages that were then in turn shared with Marcello's team out in Europol. So before we talk about the very arduous and very long sprint, they didn't have very much time. They had less than 90 days to get this done. Marcello, can you talk a little bit about Europol first, and then what Europol was able to do to coordinate and then disseminate that information in an expedited manner over to the likes of Canada, so it'll ultimately end up in Marc-André's hands to actually execute, please.
Sure. Sure. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much to the organizers of this edition of InCyber 2023. And thank you to you, Platia, for being here. It demonstrates a lot, high interest in this topic. So I'm here to represent Europol, the European side of the investigation and the support which was greatly provided to FBI and to the Canadian Royal Mounted Police. So let's start from what is Europol. Europol is the European agency for the law enforcement cooperation, meaning that is a European Union agency which depends directly from the European Commission. Its headquarters is in The Hague, in the Netherlands, and the mission is mainly to support the member states of the European Union in preventing and combating all the forms of serious crime which are affecting mainly the citizens of the European Union and destroying their financial assets and savings. So Europol is targeting mainly, is supporting the law enforcement in the member states, and not only because we have operational agreements with several partners, agencies around the world, together with international organizations. Our area of expertise is the terrorism, the international drug trafficking and money laundering, the cybercrime, the organized crime, the counterfeiting of banknotes, euro mainly, and documents, and the trafficking in human beings. Europol is mainly a hub which hosts all the information provided by member states and third parties, and in this way we are facilitating the exchange of information between law enforcement and the security agency which are dedicated to fight the crimes. We also provide a bunch of training and strategic support. This, again, in order to strengthen the capabilities of the law enforcement at European level. Another unique aspect that I would like to underline is, I think, is something which is very, very particular, because we as Europol, being in our position, we are able to set up this joint operation among the member states and the third parties again. This way we are ensuring a very united and effective response to the major threats that that transcend the national borders. So this is my brief introduction about Europol, the European Union. Maybe you have a question why Europol if Canada and FBI are, let's say, a broad agency. Because as I said, we have a strong cooperation since years based on operational agreement with many law enforcement around the world. Because of course we are supporting the 27 member states in Europe, but without the help of the rest of the world, we are really weak, if I can use this term. So happy to have on board Canada and the US on this. Going to the support in detail we provided to Genesis Marketplace, to Cookie Monster case, Europol through the European Cybercrime Center, which is called EC3, Europol has 4 different operational units. One of them is the Cybercrime Center, the European Cybercrime Center, which I'm part of. We have been approached at the end of 2019 by the US FBI liaison officer at Europol. Europol is hosting something like 900 liaison officers from the member states and the third parties. So the law enforcement are a real part of the agency, because it's the 80% of the people in the headquarters are liaison officers. And we have been approached by FBI, which brought to our attention the case Genesis Marketplace, which was already known, but not as a matter of priority. and other two member states were investigating at that time, namely the Swedish law enforcement and the Dutch cybercrime unit. Starting from there, Genesis became a priority for us, not only for us, but also for the law enforcement, which at that stage were initiating or supporting at domestic level their investigation. We trust in the personal interaction, in the in-person interaction. So we hosted several meetings in person at Europol. We ran monthly video conference in order to decide to discuss what was possible to share and what was possible to do. We reached an agreement with these three countries, and we shared all information with the rest of the law enforcement community. So our role was mainly to push and to split the information, as Amanda pinpointed, in the right way with the law enforcement in the member states of Europe. We shared that information. We did a big effort in enriching further what has been done by the fantastic field office of FBI in Milwaukee, and this way giving important indicators to the single law enforcement in the member states, we were able to put this law enforcement, these investigators, in the position to start investigation, to open investigation at national level. So to go there, in January this year, we ran a week sprint where we, together with FBI, with Canada and with Australia, we have this week when all the data available in a secure environment were together, and the investigators sent to represent their countries were able to deep, to analyze, and to extract what was in their intention, meaning that that was a fantastic occasion to check if the names of the users were there or not, and in which way, which kind of data were available. That was a kind of treasure, what we received from FBI. So also during this week, we decided, based on the strong and firmly statement from FBI, to set a deadline to the support, to the investigation itself. As Amanda said, we decided to run the operational phase at the beginning of April this year. And on the 4th of April, the action took place. In this occasion, Europol made available a command post with all the representatives from the participating country. Also, FBI and Canada were present there. And we started the operation early in the morning. So it was a big challenge because, as said by Amanda and Brian before, due to the different time zone, it was quite complicated to handle the single criticity or emergencies that we faced during that day. But at the end, we managed, because as you can see, we started in the morning in Europe, then we switched, because of the time zone, to the America, and then the day after to Australia. So it was a long 1.5 days, let's say, because we didn't shut off the command post until the operation was concluded.
Thanks, Marcello. What was very interesting with this is normally it takes about a half a year minimum to plan something like this. Because we already had pre-established relationships with Europol, Europol just reignited those relationships, refactored that into this operation, and then we began again, right? So those pipelines of communication, collaboration, the way in which we share, ended up resulting in being able to sprint to this within about 90 days. Let's zoom into Canada, right? Chris, if you could spend a little bit from the NC3 side, from the federal policing, all-of-country approach, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time. We can talk about some of the boots-on-the-ground effect and what you were looking at too, Marc-André, when you actually were knocking on the doors of these individuals.
Sure. Can folks hear me? That's good? Yep. So again, Chris LYNAM, the Director General of the National Cybercrime Coordination Center, a unit within the RCMP to really when we think about why we created that unit, it was to do what we did in Cookie Monster. So we got involved in late 2022 through the FBI and Europol. Canada has 2 full-time people in Europol to be able to provide that liaison, on-the-ground liaison for these type of operations. Part of the packages that they talked about being prepared or distributed, it had quite a few Canadians. We think there were at one point 200 quite active users of this, and some of the Canadian packages that came our way, or some of the information, seemed to show that they were some of the most active users on the Genesis marketplace. So very quickly, we had to come up with an operational plan of how was Canada going to play in this. And I'll get to kind of how we took some new approaches that we'd never really tried before, and how impactful that was. So once we got those packages, they still needed quite a bit of enrichment. They had to come up with, who is the actual person behind this? Where do they live? What jurisdiction in Canada do they reside in? And then we started to do that work. We did that through some of the operational sprints that we had in person, and then we did that, with just some normal intelligence analyst work based out of our headquarters in Ottawa. At the same time, we realized that we need partners domestically in Canada to go after those users. And so many of the users were in Quebec, and so our main partner on that was the Sûreté, and Marc-André will kind of talk about how they did it. And then even they at their level couldn't take on all this work, and they had to bring in others. So we had 28 domestic police services that we brought together, and not only do that enrichment, to start to come up with game plans of how we were going to go after those users. So that culminated with the activity on April 4th, just like the other countries in the world. And what it involved was, in the end, we had 79 law enforcement actions. And I'll get why the majority of those are actually kind of definitely new for cyber. 9 of those ended up in people being arrested in different jurisdictions. 9 of those were search warrants that will lead probably to further action later on. But 60 of those where we had police go to the door of the suspect or the user and talk to them. And we purposely did that to for some of the lower end folks that we weren't really sure how active they were on the site, to send a message that police are looking at users out there, and it's probably in your best interest not to engage in this type of activity going forward. And the reaction that we got was very interesting. Some of it was, a young individual, a university student, really didn't know what he was getting into, and we sort of scared him into another path. But even in some of the other activities that was happening is we were running a command post out of Ottawa, along with supporting another regional command center in Ontario and Quebec. Is we were getting real-time information back from the police that were on the ground knocking on people's doors. And in one case, we had an individual who, right after the police left, didn't really want to talk to them, got back on a forum and started communicating and saying, hey, they're on to us, like, I don't know what's going on, what have you. And so we were able to see this in real time. And so what did we do? We called up the local police that were on that file, and we sent them back to the person's door. So you can imagine the surprise of that individual when the police come up and say, hey, we saw that you were back on the forum. Like, didn't we just give you a pretty straight warning about what you're doing? And so what we were doing in the background was sowing this discord amongst the cyber criminals, the users that were doing this. The final piece I'll talk about before I hand over to Marc-André is we think those 60 sort of cease and desist type actions, what we're really trying to do is prevent new cyber criminals or novice cyber criminals becoming hardened. I would say it's never been easier within Canada, or frankly in any country, to become a cyber criminal. So we've got to figure out new techniques and more modern techniques to prevent a whole new generation. And then finally, what we also did for the first time for the RCMP in Canada is the victims of the Genesis marketplace. The law enforcement agencies in a couple countries, including the FBI, they provide the information on the compromised credentials to an organization called Have I Been Pwned? And so we pointed our victims through news releases and whatever to say, look, here's what's happening in Genesis. If you think you're a victim, go to this site and you'll be able to see if you were compromised. So overall, this, as we've heard already, this wouldn't have happened without this incredible international collaboration and domestic, and trying a few things differently. So I'll stop there and turn it to Mark.
Yeah, so you can see that starting at the very beginning, someone comes up with a case, they put the baseline of the case together. They realize that they can't do it on their own. They come up with an innovative way to not just go after the administrators and also the infrastructure, but go after the users. Don't wait until they become hardened criminals. Find a way to develop those packages. Give it to a big organization like Europol. Leave it to them to split it down into multiple bite-sized chunks for each country. Someone's like Canada's Chris LYNAM's NC3 team takes it. They then in turn pare it down, province to province, and ultimately it reaches the end user, our law enforcement partners down in SQ. So Marc, can you tell us a little bit more on Marc-André?
Thank you, Brian. Genesis Market, the Cookie Monster operation started for us in January 2023. So at that point, we were already on the final sprint 2 months before the operation that was scheduled for the beginning of April. And it was our partner at NC3 that came to us with the request to participate in the operation. And I remember reading the first briefings and reading that the FBI had seized a dark market and that they wanted us to take down 72 users in the same day in 2 months. And my first thought was, there must be a typo there.
No big deal.
It's either 7 or it's 2, but it can't be 72. Just to put things in perspective, at that point I had 5 years experience investigating cybercrime, and I never had a case with more than 2 suspects. So we're 70 suspects more at that time. But again, we really understood what Amanda was saying about the third pillar, like targeting users and the interest that an operation like that could have in Quebec. So we accepted the request and we worked towards getting this done. Obviously, we talked to our boss and with our crown, and we felt comfortable in trying to prepare to get to prosecute 4 to 6 users in that time. Though the FBI with 72 user logs, we were in front of a mountain of information. People at NC3 helped us with analyzing everything in order to choose which of those targets were the most interesting police-wise. We found a network of users that had been collaborating on Genesis Market and had been using the service for years. All those guys had priors in financial crime, which we expected, but they also had priors in drug trafficking and some even in violent crimes. So obviously they were a big interest to us. So at our level at the Sûreté du Québec, we decided to concentrate our efforts on them. Although we had a bunch of other targets that were given to us, and we really felt that Operation Cookie Monster was a good occasion for us to change a narrative that we had seen in the media in the past few years, that the police in Quebec weren't doing much to tackle the cyber-enabled financial crime. But in order to change that narrative, we understood that we had to coordinate as much action as we could on those suspects, even if that meant only conducting voluntary interviews of those suspects regarding that. So what happened, we tried gathering as much intel on the Genesis users as we could, and another problem came up. About 95% of those users were living either in Montreal or in the suburbs direct of Montreal. So for those who know Quebec, all those cities are covered by municipal police forces. Those police forces are obviously a little smaller than the Sûreté du Québec, and apart from the police of Montreal, none of them have dedicated specialized cybercrime investigation unit. So that could prove a problem going forward. I remember having a discussion with Brian regarding this. Our forces are scattered around Quebec, but we're a little thin around Montreal, especially for an operation that big. So we talked about bringing in 12 other police services into the Cookie Monster operation. And the discussion we had, Brian suggested, yeah, we'll just send them some requests and see if they want to come in. And we had concerns about sending a request in English to what we wanted the other police services to do, and we were really glad that everyone accepted to participate in the operation and conduct those voluntary searches.
Yeah, Mark, you're being kind, right? I said, hey, look, I'm going to reach out to all of these partners that you have. I'm going to talk to them and tell them how important this is. And you basically said, no, that's a horrible idea, right? And then you said, why don't we talk to them? We understand who they are. We understand what they can and cannot do. They know us. We have the trust built. So that's like that collaborative discussion we have is, okay, I'm going to lean on the expertise of you. You understand the territory, right? So really appreciate it. So thank you very much, because we wouldn't have gotten there, right, without that advice from you.
So thank you. So to conclude, on April 4th, 175 police officers in Quebec were mobilized in Operation Cookie Monster. We made 4 different searches that targeted our networks of 6 users. We had people from every cybercrime investigation unit in Quebec, so people from the RCMP, people from the Police of Montreal, and people from SQ, as well as our partners from the CRTC. We're also investigating some targets. We also had we had to ask the assistance of a tactical group from Montreal and Quebec because of risk assessments. A funny thing, we saw a woman try to escape Montreal's tactical unit by carrying a big printer down an emergency stairwell, so that was kind of funny. And we were also lucky to have the FBI made available to us a cyber dog, so a dog that specialized in detecting electronic storage components. So this member from the FBI helped us make sure we didn't miss any evidence. And as for the searches, 12 police agencies conducted all day long interviews with users of Genesis Market, and we really hope that these interviews bring perspective to those suspects for them to never use that kind of platform again, and for sure they're on our radar right now.
Thanks, Marc-André. So I think we shared this takedown page earlier, so I want to flip this back over to Amanda. So everyone can see, I want to see here some of the articles internationally that came around. Made a huge splash. The point is that was intentional. We want to send a message to the users, to the actors, to the administrators that we can reach out, we can touch you. Now, interesting thing here is, look at the bottom right of that takedown page. You're probably thinking I'm going to point towards, the Canadian flag and the SQ and the RCMP badge, but there's something at the bottom right there as well. So Amanda, can you tell us a little bit more about that and the private sector collaboration that was very critical to this operation?
Sure. So what Brian has on the screen here is our splash page that obviously went up on the website when the domains were seized. So this is what people would see if they went to Genesis Market post the takedown. So generally speaking, on splash pages, we'll put all of the organizations, law enforcement organizations that supported the takedown. And here you see in the corner we have KNUTSON, which is not a law enforcement organization, that's a private sector partner. To my knowledge, this is the first time we've actually put a private sector partner on a splash page like this. However, this is not the first time that a private sector partner has helped out in an investigation. So we really value our private sector partnerships. They usually have information, access, capabilities, or just a different perspective than law enforcement has. And so there hasn't been a major FBI or global law enforcement takedown where private sector has not played a role. This is just a decision that we made, obviously with their support, to highlight that partnership and their significant contributions to the case.
Thanks, Amanda. So that is the end of the presentation. We're free to take some questions if you wish. We're also going to be available afterwards. We want to underline a few components here. Not only does this highlight the collaborative aspect that private sector, public, private, multiple countries can actually do something, where if one country or one agency were just to do one door knock, it wouldn't mean anything, right? However, if there were hundreds or thousands across 16 countries, all at the same time, intentionally, you can actually starve the business model of cybercrime. We are doing more of this sort of effort. The 5 things I want to underline: first, the barrier to entry, like what Amanda said, super low. You don't need to be at the bottom of the basement. You don't need to be wearing a black hoodie and have technical expertise to be a hacker anymore. It's easy to be a cyber criminal nowadays, and that's more of a warning. Number 2, the innovative approach. Always try and out-create and out-innovate the adversary, right? Whether that be in your business or also here in law enforcement. Marc-André's team, they brought in the CRTC, a regulatory agency. Not law enforcement, but regulatory, because they have a different way of applying pressure to the adversary. From a user standpoint, the way in which you operationally approached, right, your efforts and your takedown, you didn't just go after the admins, you went after everybody to include the users. Third, go after the criminals that may be the future heavy cyber criminals in cybercrime 3 years from now. Don't wait until they become very prolific to take them down. Knock on the door and get them on your radar soon. Fourth, remember, this is a business. They have business models. Starve the business model through collaboration. I said this last year. The adversaries, they out-innovate us, they communicate better than we do, and we need to fix that. We need to turn the tide. And lastly, we can't do this without the private sector. You're the other joint task force member that needs to be a part of this. We look forward to having further conversations about collaborating on similar, like-minded operations like this in the future to make things a little bit safer. So again, thank you very much. We know that you have an option to go see many different presentations. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with us. Appreciate it.